Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
Well, I'm doing great today, too. Thanks for asking. And we'd like to thank you all for tuning in. Today on the Voice of Yoga, we will talk about the popular police song written and sung by Gordon Sumner, with a deeper meaning for the lyrics, which seem to be about stalking. Listen as we explain why things are not always what they seem to be, because there is always a deeper, more reliable reality known as divine truth. In this show, we will discuss the idea of life without principle as the branch cut from the vine, a show about the common mistake of trying to get mental material union without union with the divine principle. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and experience conscious awareness of the divine self. Swami, I see the title of today's show is Every Breath You Take. Well, let's get started. What should we talk about?
Well, today we'll explore why some things seem to be popular in spite of appearance. We're looking at the benefit of spiritual influence on what seems to be a material appearance. The other day I was inspired by the song Every Breath You Take by the Police, and it rang loud and clear. This is about the divine idea, which is everywhere always, awaiting individual recognition. I was thinking Sting must be writing about the divine self. But when I did research on the meaning of the song, it seemed to be about stalking. When I was in the building trades, we had a saying, sometimes the dumbest one in the gang comes up with the best idea. Or the saying you use, even a blind squirrel can find a nut sometimes. In truth, we are all the reflection of the divine self, made and maintained in the image and likeness of perfection. But as we say in Kriya Yoga, Namaste. Yes, we're all equally divine, but we are not all equally sensitive or conscious of this divinity. The question here will be, is it possible a song which is considered creepy may also have a divine side? In fact, in the light of the divine truth, there is no creepy. It's a matter of perspective. Are we sowing to the flesh and seeing the many, or are we sowing to the spirit and seeing only the one? Do we see a person desperately seeking approval and possession, or do we know the truth about creation and see the divine self waiting patiently for acknowledgement?
Swami, can we dig a little deeper in what you said? It's a matter of perspective. How do we know if we're sowing to the flesh or if we're sowing to the spirit?
Well, I guess one of the things that you could use is, how do you perceive the scenario of the song? Do you see it as one person seeking another person's approval and possession? Or do you see this as the divine principle waiting at that open door of revelation for you to acknowledge me? Am I conscious of persons, places, things? Or do I see the one perfect divine being looking at itself, as itself, of itself, and to itself, everywhere, always? Am I in time and space? Am I able to think in terms of the absolute? Do I have a mortal mind that works on contrast? Or do I have the mind of Christ that sees the divine creation? These are questions you start to ask yourself, and you have to understand you can't have both. The outer world of sense and the inner world of spirit become one when divine truth is the only consciousness. So we are either struggling under the law of karma with a belief in two powers, or we are walking in the kingdom of heaven on earth.
So, Swami, earlier you had said, in truth, we are all the reflection of the divine self, made and maintained in the image and likeness of perfection. That being the case, how could we not be sowing to the spirit if we're all made in the reflection of the divine self? Can we just talk about that for a bit?
Yeah, the idea here is that is the truth of being. But we're not all equally conscious of that divine truth. The term that they use in Christian Science is hypnotized. We're hypnotized. Mary Baker Eddy figured that out with this idea of the dream of Adam. Hypnotism works on belief. And so you start to see the mental material world of energy is a hypnotic dream state. But it's not the divine creation. And if you start with a belief in the divine creation, then you're on the level playing field with those that believe in two powers, the good and evil world of energy. Once you realize that is a belief and you're under this law of karma, for every action there is an equal and an opposite reaction, you're in the cycle of death and rebirth. But as Jesus said, know the truth and it makes you free from the belief in mortality, the belief in a lifespan, as opposed to knowing the truth. Life is perfect, eternal, and complete.
So in the summary, we had said we're going to talk about this common mistake of trying to get mental material union without union with the divine principle. Let's break that down for our listeners so we can get a better understanding of what we're talking about here.
Yes, the whole idea of the inner marriage, the union of the individual with the divine. We did a show many years ago called Sex Out of Marriage is a Sin. And we talked about the importance of this inner union with the divine principle, what the Old Testament called the new covenant, what Jesus called being born again of spirit. This union of the individual with the divine is what initiates the progressive cycle in development. And so we continue to approach our lives without this deeper wisdom, rituals, ceremonies, ordeals, ascetic practices that facilitated a developmental process. So we try and get this union of two people without that deeper union, and we wonder why things are failing so desperately, because we're approaching our lives without principle. We don't have the primary relationship with the divine. We're not becoming humans in the adult state. And so trying to live your life under the government of infantile defense mechanisms, trying to protect what isn't even there, and we can't figure out why it isn't working.
So it may not be a good time maybe to go over the lyrics of the song, and these we got from Music Match online. Now I'll read it. Every breath you take and every move you make, every bond you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you every single day, and every word you say, every game you play, every night you stay, I'll be watching you. Oh, can't you see you belong to me? How my poor heart aches with every step you take, every move you make, and every vow you break, every smile you fake, every claim you stake, I'll be watching you. End of the lyrics. What are your thoughts about these lyrics, Swami?
As we say, what surrounds us is within us, and the small and the simple explain the large and complex, or as above, so below. This song can be a vivid portrait of the relationship between principle and idea, or God and man, the real man, which is the divine creation from above. And from below, it may seem like a human relationship, a stalking obsession. The important difference is found in who is interpreting the appearance or belief, and whether it is conscious or unconscious. To understand this deeper divine relationship better, I refer to C.S. Lewis, who didn't believe in a personal relationship with God in the same way he didn't think Hamlet could ever know Shakespeare. Also, Mary Baker Eddy called the human experience a reflection, which can be interpreted to mean mind considering its own content. The divine self is one, without opposite. So it really comes down to, how do I know myself? Do I know myself as a finite mortal being living in time and space, or do I know myself in the way that I am created, spiritual, one with the divine creative principle?
So we listen to this song and we think it's about stalking, but we want to come to a higher level of understanding or higher level of consciousness. So how would we go about to do that? To look at this song from a different, higher level?
Well, what we say now is you have to build the mental landscape that will support the divine principle. You start with a belief in the divine creation. As you build that mental landscape, you have to understand the divine principle correctly. If you accept the Orthodox religious concept of a creator that rewards and punishes, then of course you don't have a principle that will be demonstrable. You're working with a contradiction. You're working with duality. In order for this to really begin to demonstrate, you need a principle and a rule. The principle is the divine creation is all there is. Now, once you have established a belief in the divine creation, the next octave of that is belief in the divine principle begins to demonstrate. It has a very profound effect on the mental material false sense of life. It's appearing in the testimony of the corporeal senses. This was the message of the Christ: heal the sick, reform sinner, raise the dead. Conscious awareness of divine truth is a demonstrable principle. It's a law, and it reveals itself on a mental material level. We have sayings like, to err is human, to forgive divine. You can't make a silk purse from a sow's ear. What I've found is it all depends on individual level of consciousness and degree of awareness, or simply how we think is what we become. However, do we even know there are modes of thinking? 3 modes of mortal thought, thinking with divine mind. There are levels of consciousness, because the average person's thinking today doesn't get above the waistline. We never get out of this personal sense of self, human need. And eventually you come to the realization life in matter must be given up for life in spirit.
We're going to pause right here to hear a word from our sponsor. Listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments. Institute for Personal Development Incorporated is a Kriya Yoga ashram offering yoga classes in all 8 stages of Kriya Yoga, including classes, personal training, teacher training, residential program, online live classes and online products for self-discovery and transformation. Discover, learn, and practice one of the oldest and purest forms of yoga, Kriya Yoga, by uniting ancient religion with modern science. Visit www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste. Welcome back. For those who are just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So I'd like to get back to talking about the modes of thinking and levels of consciousness. Can you help us determine when we know we need to change or move forward from a level of consciousness, and how do we do that?
Well, again, this is what in Kriya Yoga we call initiating your developmental process. The process unfolds in 3 phases, where we go from unconscious awareness to self-conscious awareness to superconscious awareness. The way you experience this is only reason walks through the open door of revelation. You really have to develop yourself physically, mentally, in order to qualify for this surrendering of a personal sense of self for the divine self. And the way we do it is we mark points of passage with rites of passage. Typically, your first point of passage was around age 7, when you reached what was called the age of reason. We graduate from being instinctual, reactive, emotional, and now we cultivate our human modes of intelligence, where it's no longer appropriate for us to be operating from infantile defense mechanisms. As infants, we need mom and dad. And if somebody out there doesn't like you, you expire. But at age 7 is when we should now begin to think differently. We start cultivating the faculties of human intelligence, perception, reason, memory, intuition. And all of this is all part of growth, physiologically, psychologically, all to attain the opportunity where you can now surrender this personal sense of self for divine self. And as you develop yourself physiologically, psychologically, and you understand how things are really working, so that you can now develop a personal sense of self with a certain degree of human willpower and human intelligence, so that you can overcome this hypnotic state of world consciousness, understanding that the mental material world of energy is not the divine creation. Like Jesus said, I have overcome the world. He does this by being able to control how he thinks and eventually stop thinking, because as Krishnamurti pointed out, the mind can't free itself from its own creation. Thinking with this mortal mind is what is creating the veil, preventing us from knowing the truth, which is the divine creation, everywhere, always. But it is only available to those that have eyes to see, ears to hear. We must graduate from thinking with corporeal senses and knowing with 7 spiritual senses.
So Swami, so if I walk outside the door and it's a beautiful day and I say, oh, this is a beautiful day, this could be a trap for me, because we're not talking about positive thinking here. We're talking about really understanding what it is we're really looking at.
All the good, beautiful, and true attributes belong to the divine. But we must be aware everything appearing in the corporeal senses isn't real. Or as Mary Baker Eddy wrote, sometimes beautiful, always erroneous. It is most important to understand finite good is not spiritual substance, which means it isn't real, but must always be seen as unreal because it's not created by the divine principle. Now, in this song, which has eloquence, harmony, grace, and beauty gives thought the benefit of spiritual awareness for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. This makes it easier to see the spirit behind the sound, thus allowing for the scriptural command to sow to the spirit and not the flesh.
So now let's talk about another couple of lines from the lyrics of the song. I'll read it. Since you've gone, I've been lost without a trace. I dream at night, I can only see your face. I look around, but it's you I can't replace. I feel so cold and I long for your embrace. I keep crying, baby, baby, please. Oh, can't you see you belong to me? How my poor heart aches with every step you take, every move you make, and every vow you break, every smile you fake, every claim you stake, I'll be watching you. Every move you make, every step you take, I'll be watching you. I'll be watching you, every breath you take, every move you make, every bond you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you. I'll be watching you, I'll be watching you. End of the verse. Your thoughts about this set of lyrics?
Yeah, this deep longing is so real because the relationship between principle and idea is one of equality. They both depend on each other. The purpose of the human experience is to glorify the Creator by being that place where divine truth expresses itself through human form, revealing the divine creation. The mortal sense of life is out of the Father's house, out of divine consciousness, and it is under the law of karma or material law, which is driven by a belief in two powers instead of one. Karmic law is considered the love of God because it is the ouch effect, not letting individuals accept anything less than the perfection of the divine inheritance. This idea of loneliness. I really like the Hindu myth where they talk about God being all, the infinite supreme being becomes all of creation. You, me, all the events, circumstances, situations of this world simply for its own amusement. And when you examine it, you understand this idea of loneliness. We often like the idea we're never alone, when in truth, if there is only one, we are always alone. And so like Emerson told us, man is God playing fool. All of this proves out scientifically, but do I want to give up the belief in mortality? Give up the dream of the mental material world of energy? And what you start to see is you really can't have both. Either you know the truth, life is perfect, nobody's born, nobody ever dies, but there's only one and I'm always alone, living in this changeless state of being, or you continue to believe in the mental material false sense of existence as real. And I think what Mary Baker Eddy did with Christian Science is trying to see the pragmatic application of the Christ, of knowing the omnipresence of the divine creation, being able to use it to help you manage what seems to be the changing conditions of this personal existence.
So somebody might be thinking they're at maybe this higher level of divine consciousness. Maybe they're listening to the lyrics of these songs and they think, well, this means that God is watching over us, watching everything we do. So what's the trap here with thinking that?
To understand yourself spiritually and scientifically, you understand spirit is a demonstrable principle. To think God is watching over the mental material world of energy doesn't give you a principle. That's what Mary Baker Eddy called pantheism. God is all. God is everything. God made the good and the bad. When we misunderstand the principle, you lose your rule. The only way we can demonstrate divine law with any kind of scientific certainty is we must know ourselves in the way that we are known by the Creator. Like Scripture says, ask in my name. It means my likeness. Ask in spiritual identity. When you know yourself in the way you are known by the Creator, you are one under divine law. There is no opposition, no sickness, suffering, disease, lack, limitation. God did not make any of these things. Therefore, God knows nothing about this world. God is conscious of God's creation. That's the importance of the mind of Christ. What sees the divine creation is what will make the divine creation comprehensive to human consciousness. But without it, there's no way of knowing this truth. What we're calling life isn't life at all. And then you find man says, show and I will trust. And God says, trust and I will show. This is a simple way of knowing what side of the fence you're on at any given time, because we can switch in a heartbeat. Remember, one bite of an apple from one of these trees, the tree of knowledge, the tree of good and evil, banishes you from Eden, out of divine consciousness. Eat only from the tree of life. To accept spiritual identity, one needs the mind of Christ, because if you don't see divine principle everywhere, you don't see it anywhere. Spirit is omnipresent and cannot be divided, which means we can't see the divine creation with the mortal mind, which works on contrast, which sees only the mental material concept, the false sense of life. The divine self is all there is, everywhere, always. But one must be conscious of it to activate it in experience. And thinking about it isn't the same as being conscious of it. But it is very possible to be unconscious of divine self, which is the only reality, and see what isn't there, which is the mental material sense of life we call me.
So the next time I hear this song, Every Breath You Take, I'm definitely going to be listening to that with a different sense of perspective, not somebody longing for somebody else, but have this degree of awareness for the divine principle.
Yeah, once you graduate your concept of love from the human level, the idea of attraction and what I like and what I dislike, no longer judging things based on just the information coming through your corporeal senses, but beginning to develop this larger relationship with the divine. It gives you a much larger foundation, an anchor that enables you to detach yourself from the neediness of personal sense. And you're plugged into a resource that is everywhere always, will never let you down, and your exchange of energy is completely outward. You're pouring out. You're that place where the divine principle is expressing itself through you as you. You're no longer pulling energy back into a personal sense of self. It's a very different sense of existence, but after a while, any love song or even any romantic movie remind you of the relationship between the divine principle and this real self, the immortal self. I am everywhere, always.
That completes the show for today. Listeners, be sure to visit the website www.ipdtransform.com. On any of the pages, as you scroll down, you'll see several buttons there that you can press that will further your understanding. Swami, any final thoughts about today's program?
Well, I would like to encourage people to join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance, get the light in your soul, and experience conscious awareness of the divine self. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to the program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton along with Swami Jayananda signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga realization. Namaste.